So first of all, I have just turned on record. We record these programs so that people who are not able to make it live can watch them after the fact. So please be aware that if you are anywhere audio or video wise, you will be recorded. My name is David Kraemer, and I am the director of the library at the Jewish Theological Seminary. It is thrilling to see all of you, or at least to see the screen with your name on it. You're welcome to join with your face as well, if you like, but there's no obligation. And we're very excited about this, which is the last of our 4-program series. Before I do the substance, just a couple of technicalities. I will keep everyone on mute because, of course, we want to hear Jeremy and Amanda. We want to hear the presenters. So, if you unmute by accident, I will go and find you and I'll remute you. So don't worry about it, but please remain on mute. And there will be time for questions at the end. The best way to do that will be to send my way in the chat any question you might have, and I will be the one who will send it to Jeremy and Amanda's way. I will also spotlight them at the very beginning of their presentation so that they are the ones and the screen that they share that we will all see. In any case, as I said, this is the 4th in a series sponsored by the Library of the Jewish Theological Seminary and co-sponsored by the Lowell Milken Center for Music of American Jewish Experience at UCLA. And it's really been thrilling to have the Milken Center as our co-sponsors for these wonderful programs. This, as the last of the 4 programs, is quite appropriate because we just, in a fanciful way, decided to call this sequence of programs Musical Journeys with the Library of JTS. Lo and behold, tonight we're actually going to be led on a journey. So in terms of the actual substance of what we're going to hear, this is the most directly relevant to the way we conceived of this whole thing. But we've really had a chance to learn a lot about music and its emotion and its impact. Our presenters, from the bio and the description of the program, but just to review it quickly, Amanda has a PhD in musicology from Northwestern, and she is a lecturer in music at Carroll University. Jeremy is at Congregation Beth Israel Ner Tamid in Milwaukee. And when I asked him, what would you like me to emphasize? He singled out the Haggadah supplement that he's working on, which will tell the story of the Abayudaya. And as you know, this program is about the Cantors Assembly trip and the music of the Abayudaya. And so we're looking forward to being led on this little path to another place, and given the confinement we've experienced, somewhat different time as well. So please, Amanda and Jeremy, welcome, and thanks for the program you're going to share with us.
Dr. Kraemer, thank you so much for having us as your speaker this evening. It's really a privilege to be able to share everything that we have.
Keep going.
Oh. So when I was in cantorial school, we're now talking about 15 years ago, I was studying for the year in Jerusalem, and also there was a rabbinical student named Gershom Sizomu, who's from Uganda. And I would when I was on my way, I was studying at the conservative yeshiva, and up the street from the yeshiva was a conservative congregation. And I remember walking by one day, and it had on a sign, "Join us this Friday night, Gershom Sizomu, with services led by Gershom Sizomu of Uganda." And I said, "Whoa." I said, "I'm there." And I went there, and it was an amazing service. Gershom was in Jerusalem studying in rabbinical school. And after the service, I went up to him and introduced myself and said, I'd love to learn more of your melodies. And he very graciously invited me to his apartment later the next week. And he taught me many of their melodies. And one in particular, their Hine Matov, which is very well known, I took with me wherever I went, to schools, to camps. And when I had an interview years later at this congregation here in Milwaukee, and they said, plan to teach us something fun and different. I said, I got something that they won't have heard. And I came, and at my audition, I said, I'd like to teach you this melody. It's sung by the Abayudaya, the Jews of Uganda. And everyone gave a big smile. And I said, what? And it turned out that the rabbi at the time, Rabbi Jacob Herber, had very recently returned from a rabbinical mission to Uganda, was part of one of the waves of conversions of the Abayudaya. And he had just come back, and he had been telling them all about the Abayudaya and about their customs and about their music. And it wasn't the new experience that I was hoping to bring, but it all worked out.
Yeah, and we didn't know each other yet, but I was already a member of this congregation, and we had brought Rabbi Suzomo here to Milwaukee. He'd been able to talk and sing for us on some of these tours that maybe some of you have also been able to experience and hear his story. And so we both knew about and were very interested in this kind of aspect of Jewish music. Jeremy as a cantor and as a song leader, and myself as at that point kind of burgeoning student of musicology, who was living her life mostly with Leonard Bernstein and Jewish composers of classical music. But we both knew it was something that we were interested in, and we kind of, in our marriage, we just sort of agreed, like, if this ever is an opportunity for us, we got to jump on it. We got to make this happen someday in our family's life.
And then about 3 years ago, I was at a Cantors Assembly convention, and very recently there was the latest in what has been a series of setbacks among Abayudaya, desire to spend extended periods in Israel. It's a very complicated issue, but for just in brief, the Cantors Assembly wanted to show some solidarity for the Abayudaya and their legitimacy as Jews, and also the legitimacy of conservative Judaism, which many of the communities belong to. And they said, we're going to plan a mission to Uganda. And they said, let us know if you want to go. I said, I want to go. And they said, great, who do you want to co-chair with? And I said, okay, great. So then I called up Amanda. I said, Amanda, guess what? I'm going on a mission with the CA to Uganda.
And I said, I'm going to go too. And that was how we ended up on this wonderful trip with 9 cantors, myself and another cantor spouse who was a lawyer, together from across the country. We had people from the West Coast, East Coast, and the South, and from Florida. So this really,
Midwest.
And the Midwest, yes. This really beautiful kind of coming together also of cantors, which for me as a musicologist was really amazing to be a part of. And should we talk about the goals of the trip?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So we
can come back to that.
Yeah. We wanted to learn as much as possible. We, as cantors, we are used to going in and being in charge and being up front. And we said, this is going to be an opportunity for us to take a step back and really learn as much as we can from this very unique community.
And we really found also, as a part of going in there wanting to learn, was that our Abayudaya brothers and sisters were also really hungry to learn from the cantors as well. And so what kind of happened as a part of that was some really beautiful shared music making, learning each other's melodies, and bringing together the different styles of the cantors we had, who all have really different voices and styles and approaches in their own congregations. And so this idea of shared music making across our communities, with men and women, women on our trip, women in Uganda, and the men both on our trip, and our Abayudaya friends, as they really became.
Yeah. And we decided we wanted some way both to document our trip, but also as a way to document their 100-year history. We'll back up in a minute to tell you a little bit about that. But the first thing we wanted to do was create a recording of their music. And when we spoke with Rabbi Sizomu, one of the things he was really insistent on is that not only did he want us to record their music, but he wanted to make it a collaborative effort, that he wanted there to be a combination of their music, but also the music that we were bringing from America.
And one of the things that was really special to come out of this trip was, some of you may be familiar with some of the existing recordings that are out there. The one that accompanies the Sobel Summit book, coffee table book, that some of you may have seen or own, and the beautiful album that was published through Smithsonian Folkways and was nominated for a Grammy. But we were able to really make a priority of recording the young people, which you can really see here in this photograph. The young woman that's singing at the center is actually like a really young leader, and she's 17, or she was 17 at the time, and was leading services as part of our time there. You'll see next to her in the white shirt, that is one of Rabbi Suzomu's daughters, who celebrated her bat mitzvah just prior to COVID. So it was really amazing for us to sort of hear and see not only Rabbi Suzomu and his brothers and others of his generation, but also the growth of the community since like the published recordings had been done, and really contribute to, the expanding and beautiful voice that's coming out of this community.
And we also wanted to, hear their story directly from them and hear their experience. Many of them were born Jewish. Many of them have chosen to become Jewish, either as young adults or as older adults. And it was just fascinating to hear. There are many, as different as we might expect our Jewishness to be. It was very fun to, and it was very surprising sometimes to hear just how similar we were. Same issues with dealing with assimilation, of
wanting to make sure that young people like coming to synagogue, wanting to make sure we keep the melodies, some of the melodies that feel so much a part of who we are, and for the Abayudaya so much that feel a part of who they are, but also continuing to learn and to expand. You can see here along your right, Cantor Steve Storr of Chicago, who really kind of led a lot of the interviewing portion as part of that with this project.
And those in Milwaukee will recognize the person at the center of this picture. That is Cantor Jerry Berkowitz. He works at a congregation in Manitowoc and Anshe Pole Tzedek, and he very generously got his synagogue to donate one of their Torah scrolls that they don't use anymore. And he schlepped it first, I think by car or by bus, all the way to New York, and then on the plane from New York to Kenya, and then Kenya to Uganda. And we had this beautiful ceremony where we gifted this Torah to the community in Nabugoye, the main city which you see here. And you'll see there, there's a chuppah above him, and they're carrying, they're supporting it with sugarcane. which is the custom in Uganda. And we started at the bottom of the hill playing Israeli and klezmer style music. And then when we got up to the top of the hill where the synagogue was, the Abayudaya were singing their Ugandan music. And there was this moment where it beautifully melded one into the next.
There's a picture of that. If I track back to, yeah, here, this is the moment, in fact, when the two groups sort of met in the center there.
Yeah. So a very, very, very brief history of the Abayudaya. Like all histories of peoples, it's always more complicated than you can describe in a single lecture. But in 1919, a tribal leader named Semeka Kungulu had been approached by British missionaries, hoping that he would convert to Christianity and sort of help them in both their missionary work and also in their colonialism work. And he, again, this is a much longer story, but it culminates in the story is that he rejected the New Testament part of the Bible that they gave him, tearing it in half and saying, I now follow the one true God, the God of the Israelites. And he circumcises himself and his family and many people in his tribe. And they live as Jews to the best of their abilities, according to the Bible.
It was sort of, they hadn't yet absorbed rabbinic Judaism because they didn't have access to it. The kind of intermediary years here are fuzzy on some of the history. There are like sort of Israelis by single names who kind of pass through as traders. There was some support from some Israeli diplomats who had been like he was an ambassador to Tanzania. It was several kind of ambassadors came through and brought some things that are beginning to sort of clarify, oh no, when it says in the Torah, don't boil a calf in its mother's milk. We've actually expanded that out and sort of clarified some of these rules of kashrut and things to make sure to bring them more into rabbinic practice of Judaism. But it was still in very, very, very much isolation for many, many, many years.
Yeah, and the community grew to about 3,000 people, and that came to a halt, though, in 1971 with the rise to power of Idi Amin, who was a brutal dictator on many fronts, and particularly on religion, and he forbade the practice of Judaism. And between 1971 to 1979, the Jewish community practiced in hiding and dwindled to about 300 people. And then in 1979, when Idi Amin is kicked out of power, it happens on Erev Passover. And the Abayudaya, who have been practicing in secret, are able to have a more public Seder, and which they deemed a true feast of freedom, because that was when they were able to truly practice as Jews freely and in open.
And from the 1980s and 90s and then the early 2000s, this is when the conservative movement really made its huge contribution to the Abayudaya, bringing them into the fold, accepting them, the various waves of conversion that were done through Batei Din with the Rabbinical Assembly on several missions, and then Rabbi Gershom Suzomo, coming to study at the Ziegler School in Los Angeles, and a real opening and kind of arrival on the world Jewish stage and in the world Jewish conversation. You can see here the book, the coffee table book, and the Smithsonian CD that I referenced. I want to just because we could put a little music in people's ears. This is just a clip from some of these earlier recordings. Perhaps some of you have heard this. This is just a little portion of the Luganda that came out in some of these like 2000s era recordings.
Legadodi liklati kala Bene Shabbat nakavera Legadodi liklati kala Bene Shabbat nakavera Shamonu vezakor bedenguri ehad Hishimianu aluami wadi Adonai ehad Vushimo ehad Lishemi gurit farati gurit uhira Lechadodi likirati kala Pene Shabbat nakavera Lechadodi likirati kala.
So you can really hear some elements that we heard in the more recent singing, and some things that we're going to talk about more specifically: the use of dialect of Hebrew language, the call and response, the choral and sort of leader singing, and the very organic nature of that, and just like that was sort of how people were introduced to this music. Americans, excuse me, like the broader Jewish world. And things have stayed the same, but things have also really evolved and really flowered. And that was, for me as a researcher, kind of what I took away from all of this. So let me push us forward on those slides. Sorry, somehow so the real meat of what our sort of what we've learned and what we took away, I really sum it up in a quote that I took from one of the leaders of, there are several congregations. Well, we visited 5?
It's about 5. And I think
5, but there are 7 or 8, I think. And the number, it seems like every time we go, we hear it a little higher number. There's another congregation springing up. It is not simply Nabugoye Hill, the main synagogue called the Stern Synagogue that was funded by some very generous American donors, but it is a flowering community with these smaller communities surrounding it. Again, these are sort of regionally together, but these are people who are walking to synagogue and walking in their communities. And Eliyahu Miyamba, one of the leaders, a spiritual leader of the Namanyoni congregation, he said to me, I just think this is also important because the music is what makes the Abayudaya. And he is, I think, cousin of Rabbi Suzomo. So he's sort of that generation, the same grandfather who they both sat at the feet of their grandfather learning these beautiful melodies as children. And I think that really feels true. It really, gives you a sense of who these people are, kind of looking at this beautiful repertoire. Anything to add?
So one of the main places where the Abayudaya have a strong affinity for in their singing is the Psalms. So lots of songs in the Pesukei de Zimra, the opening portion of the morning tefillot, and also Hallel.
And these Psalms are of the older generations. I'm sort of coming out of the reign of Idi Amin and kind of growing from this. And some of them we have some information on kind of who claims the authorship of, and some of them it's again a little bit was it this brother or this brother, but that's one of the kind of beautiful tracings, is that these are really owned by the whole community. And these are were initially sung in Luganda, the language of the Buganda people. The tribe is Buganda, and the language is Luganda, which is, I think, one of the 2 official languages also in the country, in addition to English. And so the psalm singing is done in Luganda, at least in the majority, there is some increasing now use of these melodies being sung in Hebrew, but it's been very important and really primacy goal to understand the words for the community and what they're singing. And so they've maintained this in Luganda. Other prayers and songs also, like the Lechadodi that I played, Don Olam, there's a few more I know that are not necessarily psalm texts, right? But have our kind of build this core repertoire.
And what was also fun was that we went there wanting to hear all of their Abayudaya music, but they've also, from visitors and from the internet and elsewhere, and from Jewish summer camps, they've brought in, the Ashkenazi melodies that many of us in America would think of, the traditional tunes, and but often they would add their own Abayudaya sort of flair to it. And we have a recording of their singing the B'tzeit Yisrael mi Mitzrayim, in their style. So as you can hear there, it was a little faint, but you can hear they've got the drumming in the background, and they've got the call and response, which is not typically part of that melody as we sing it here, but they added that, which is a typical part of their singing.
Because there have been a few youth who have, young adults who have come to work at both Ramah and some other reform camps in the United States, and I think also in South America, in Argentina, I think.
Maybe.
There's also been, there's a few camp songs that are sort of working their way in. We heard a few of those around a wonderful campfire at Rabbi Suzomu's home. And again, it's showing, I think, a embrace of their place within world Judaism, that these songs are not taking over, but they are becoming a part of their repertoire and being kind of claimed as their own. And it's really beautiful to see the mixture of things, both in prayer services and then in more recreational ones. I think the B'tzeit Yisrael recording, that was one of the ones we did when we set up a sort of mobile studio. Yeah. So it was after Havdalah, we set up a mobile studio in the one in the sanctuary, which was the only place where there was electricity after hours. And then the final, we've got two more sort of categories here.
So this picture that you see on
it's a video.
The picture that you see here is of the community in Kenya. They have a very interesting history about how they found Judaism, but in short, they were a breakoff from a Messianic church. And when they became Jewish and they formed their synagogue, they were connected with the Jews in Uganda to learn Hebrew and to learn the melodies, but also they incorporated some of the melodies from their church, but they were very careful about which ones they took. They said, we didn't take any melodies or any prayers that talked about Jesus. We only talked about the ones that that work in the synagogue. And we're gonna play one for you now. It's in their native language. I said, what is it? And they said, verses of praise. And they never were able to expand more on that, but basic verses of praise for God.
It's Kikuyu?
Yeah.
Kikuyu.
lastly, Amanda spoke earlier about there's always the new, I'm sorry, there's always the old and there's always the new. What we've played you so far has been the old, but of course the youth have their own music and very much influenced by contemporary styles. And you'll hear just but even so, even many of the Abayudaya youth are still writing, even in the contemporary styles, are writing either according to Jewish texts or with a Jewish theme of some sort. And this one that we'll play for you now, you'll hear has, modern hip hop beats and sampling, but it's called Kol Dodi, which is the words are a traditional piyut, a traditional poem for Passover.
For the past history and the now victory, would you join me in this celebration? For the most beloved, the one that loves us the most high, Rahman, Daniela, and Avital. Hear us sing now. Now I hear your voice and I'm lifted. Go to service and prayer, I'm addicted.
So cool.
Yeah.
We didn't have any involvement in that recording. This was all Rahman, but this was something that Rahman shared with us in the process of getting to know this. And you guys did work with Rahman briefly, right?
I didn't. So he lives in America.
Oh, okay.
And one of my colleagues, Mike Stein, no relation, in Los Angeles has a relationship with him, and he said, "I'd love to put your music to show people what the youth of the Abayudaya are doing on it," and he obliged. Now, one of the noticeable things about the Abayudaya's prayer and music, in addition to the music, is their Hebrew pronunciation. And when I first met Gershom, he explained that the language Luganda words frequently end in a vowel sound in it, with an E or an U. And so when they speak Hebrew, they would often, sort of out of habit, would add these extra vowels. So when he taught me his Hine Matov Umanaim turned into Hine Matovu Umanaim U Sheveti Achim Gam Yachadu. And this phenomenon is not specific to Luganda. There are many other examples. A linguist who I spoke with said that one example is that when people who are native Spanish speakers, Spanish often begins with a vowel sound rather than a consonant sound. So they might turn the word school into eschool. And that makes sense. And the Spanish word for school is escuela. And also the English name Stephen in Spanish becomes Esteban. So in Spanish, they will often add consonants or vowels, to the beginning of words. In the Abayudaya, based on the habits of their language, Luganda will habitually add vowels to the end. And so people who are familiar with their music are used to hearing Hine Matovu Umanaimu Sheveti Achim, and so on. And while we were in the studio recording, we were actually in this waiting room that you can see here on both of them, and they were singing their Hine Matov, and the people with Rabbi Sizomo, who's there, you can see him playing guitar. they start singing Hine Matovu Umanaim, and he said, no, Hine Matov Umanaim, and they'd say Hine Matovu, no, Hine Mat, and he kept correcting them. And afterwards, I asked him, why are you correcting them? That's the Abayudaya Hebrew dialect. You told me that. You had the vowels. He said, no, we're really trying to match our Hebrew to the way that Hebrew was spoken outside of Uganda, in America and in Israel. And I said, but this is, lots of different regions have their own way of pronouncing Hebrew. There's, the Ashkenazi, the Eastern European way of pronouncing Hebrew. There's the Sephardi way of pronouncing Hebrew. The Yemenites have their own way. Jews in Hungary have their own pronunciation. In Poland, he said, no, but as we learned, sometimes when you add the vowel sound to the end of words, it can change the meaning. And we really want to be precise in our Hebrew. And I said, I don't know, but that's part of what makes I think it's legitimate that that's the way you speak Hebrew. And he said, no, but sometimes you have to give up a little piece of your identity to match the greater community. And the two of us disagreed, but at the end of the day, it's really important to respect the wishes of a community. And if it's their desire to to better match the Hebrew that's spoken outside of their community, then that's what they should be encouraged to do. That being said, old habits die hard, and in their prayers and in their recordings, you'll often hear, more often than not, reverting to the Ugandan pronunciation.
Yeah, I think it's really it's a beautiful phenomenon of almost like assimilation into normative Jewish practice, and instead of kind of moving away from it, this idea of we're so proud to be a part of this community, and we want to make sure that our voice can be heard and understood. And so we felt that this is also just anecdotally it shows some of our values of the trip, and that we really wanted to let the community take the lead and guide us in their approaches to these artistic products that came out of it. Yeah. And it was a really powerful learning experience for both of us, sitting in the studio listening to him coach these young people on the couch, all squished on that couch.
I mean, it was really a cultural evolution. Mm-hmm. We were watching a cultural mm-hmm. evolution unfold in real time, which was very special.
So what we thought we would do is share with you we have four short videos of all the same Psalm 150, and we chose this one because it is the really iconically central musical psalm. I teach this psalm in my music history students when we study European music in English psalms and German psalms, and everybody likes to write a setting to this because it's so easy, you get harp and lyre and violin and or
so much repetition with hallelujah.
Yes, so repetitive, so musical. There's a gazillion versions of this that you may know and sing at your own congregations or at camp or and it is a central one that is really known throughout the different communities. I put on your right here the Luganda translation just for your sort of knowledge of the repetition of the word hallelujah. Praise God, mumu tendereze. Will repeat over and over again, and that is hallelujah, right? Mm-hmm. Hallelujah, coming back over and over again. If we were singing this in Hebrew, and so you're going to hear we're going to kind of introduce and talk about each of these, and it's a very fascinating mixture to see sort of how the communities are developing. The first one that we have is from when we were in Nabugoye, in the main synagogue, which is the largest newest physical building. And Rabbi Suzomo is at the center with guitar singing. And you'll actually hear, this is primarily being sung in Hebrew. And that was not necessarily because the cantors were all there. I actually asked him, were you doing more Hebrew because we were there? And it was that in Nabugoye, in this central synagogue where Hebrew is a little bit better known and better understood, this is where Rabbi Suzomo
and there's a rabbi on site.
He's on site. So they're in fact singing this more in Hebrew, with exception of at the very end, he introduces what I asked him later, he called the innovations, where he will introduce these little kind of call and responses. Let everything, and then he will add another word, let everything that has water, let everything that has joy, praise God. And sort of this beautiful, very organic and improvisatory innovations, as he calls them. And those are almost always done in Luganda. So there's this little sprinkle of Luganda right at the end. So you'll see some members of our trip in this, and I apologize, the video's a little shaky at first.
Don't apologize, it's great.
That's what field recordings are like. You'll notice here, we want to at least point out, there's no mechitza, but there's a sort of organic separating of men and women. It is not required. There's definitely, families that are sitting together, particularly with children in the back, just like here at home. But you'll see some young women right here in the center, amongst what might sort of seem to be more of the men, but it is extremely organic. It's just, I think Uganda is a very patriarchal society, and men and women spend a lot of time separately, just in their work and in their daily lives, and so.
Yeah, it was just, it seemed to be a natural, especially in this congregation, women tended to sit on this side, men tended to sit on that side, and there was certainly no expectation, though, or requirement. It was just seemed to be a social norm. Mm-hmm. More than certainly more than a religious expectation.
So we want to share a little bit of the Hadassah school, which we visited. It is called Hadassah. It is not related to the organization Hadassah, just to clarify. But this is the school near Nabugoye that is run by the Abayudaya and supported by several organizations abroad. And it houses Jewish, Christian, and Muslim students all together. The Abayudaya live in a primarily Muslim district. And so there is a mixture of students. All the students learn Hebrew, and all the students to some extent celebrate Shabbat. And one of the things that's common in Uganda is to have these inter-school singing competitions where they'll sing and dance both sort of national songs, and then also songs that represent sort of who they are and what their surrounding region is. So they also sang some traditional songs in traditional costuming and dancing. But what's just so amazing to me is that these young Jewish, Christian, and Muslim children are all here singing together in Luganda, and then also a little in Hebrew. Psalm 150 on these inter-school competitions. And so this, again, is a very, very different sonic version, a little bit more stylized and danced. I'm going to play a little bit from the beginning, and then I'm going to just shift to the end when it switches into Hebrew. can hear that repeating mumu tendereze, that hallelujah over and over again. There was that kol hanshama, very end.
This was a village called Nasenyi, where a group of their community greeted us outside with a beautiful song and dance in Luganda, the song was. And when we met with them inside, they sang a number of their psalms, including Psalm 150, which, like the previous version, they sang mostly in Luganda and then shifted to Hebrew. And it was a very spirited group, which was really a joy to be a part of. So we'll hear them.
This was, I think, one of the musical highlights for almost everyone on the trip.
As there wasn't a guitar player in this village, but everywhere we went, there were people who played drums.
Mm-hmm.
And what I love about this, besides the fact that it's just so beautiful, the music, is that it demonstrates so many different features of the Abayudaya singing. One, the fact that they went seamlessly first from Luganda and then into the Hebrew, using a melody that's based on their regional folk music, with the drums. There you could hear the call and response. The woman in green in the front and center, she was anticipating each verse. So she would say, for instance, Kol Hanshama, Kol Haneshama, and very, very typical of a lot of styles, but particularly certainly of this East African musical style.
And so important when not everybody has the book because the congregation doesn't have enough books. And so, but it's in their ears and in their bodies and their hearts.
Yeah, and you'll notice it's Amanda said it's a patriarchal society, but here we have a woman taking front and center. Literally, you can see front and center. Mm-hmm. She is doing the musical leading, and you see the men and women on equal footing, with women taking many leadership roles in the musical and prayer realm.
Absolutely. A lot of reading Torah by women also. We have one more example, but I do want to make sure that we have time for some questions. Should we just play like a minute of our studio recording, or should we break for questions and then we can play it at the end?
Dr. Kraemer?
Yeah, I mean, it's up to you if you want to just do a quick part of it right now and then take questions, or play it at the end after we take questions. Entirely up to you.
Why don't we do questions? We'll play it as we're going out. Okay.
So I mean, we do have a few questions. I'm gonna since you've got the screen share and you want to come back to it.
Yeah.
Nobody needs to see me. You can hear my voice in the background.
I can stop the screen share.
No, it's okay. It's I really mean that too as a way here, and let me add a spot. That way everybody can see us. Actually not directly pertinent to the music, but one of our listeners wanted to know, does the community have access to kosher food? Do they keep kosher? What's the status of their Jewish practice outside of their music?
I can tell you, I actually went back to Uganda a second time about 6 months after our trip to celebrate the 100th anniversary and view some more conversions. I saw our goat brought in on a boda motorcycle and was invited to observe the slaughter, the shechting. I declined, but I did eat that goat later in the day. Gershom, Rabbi Suzomo does practice this and has taught this to a number of others in the community. And so meat is very rare and very expensive. This is a very poor community, but
rice is a delicacy.
Rice is the staple of their diet, and a sort of plantain mash. Matoke is a real staple of their diet. It is very hard to get kosher wine unless it is sort of brought in the suitcase of guests. And so for many years they were making their own banana wine, correct? But now, I mean, I think there's often a goal to sort of really ration the kosher wine when they can get access to it.
Somebody wants to know what their Torah laning sounds like. Can you do a little bit of that?
It's nothing exciting per se. Their Torah cantillation is the same as ours. I shouldn't say the same as ours because
they've learned it from us and haven't changed it or adapted it.
No, they've learned it from. When I said us, I meant Ashkenazi. Typical diaspora Ashkenazi. The one exception, and I don't know if we have a recording handy, is one of the oldest melodies that they have in their community is the chanting for Ha'azinu, which is the poem towards the very end of the Torah. They have their own special melody. It doesn't go according to the Tamei Mikra, the trope. It's its own isolated melody. If I can find it, I can pull it up. But that would be their cantillation is Ashkenazi, similar to what you might hear in an American congregation.
And in fact, haven't you actually done some like FaceTime, even like some kind of help with one of the communities on like a little bit of laning?
Yeah, so every week I send a very short Dvar Torah to a community in a very small remote village called Nalubembe, and I've sent them a few recordings of Torah cantillation.
Up until recently, their synagogue did not have a roof. So there's no possibility for a Torah in that community at this point for many reasons, including that one. But they did have a few humashim, that were sort of kept in the home of the leaders of that community.
And from what you're saying, it sounds like you maintain a connection with the community. Is that right? Do you have plans to go back?
There's always plans. There's no immediate plans. Certainly, if anybody, once in a while, you'll hear about missions that communities are going on. And certainly, if people have their own interests, we're happy to be of a resource. We have some family expansion in the works right now, so that will ground us here in Milwaukee. But we certainly do hope to go back.
It's also, for us, like as the parents of two young children, we, my 7-year-old has chatted a few times over WhatsApp with Rabbi Suzomu's daughter, and they would like to go, and we've taught them the melodies, and so we do hope that when they're a little older, perhaps we can take a couple weeks or something and do further research. Rabbi Jeff Summit, who did a lot of the musical research that is existing and out there, has talked about, it's hard to get there. It takes planning. It takes, malaria pills. It takes money. And when you're there for, 10 days, it's really intense, and you want to be there for longer so you can really live with the community. But I think we would both like to go back, and I think other members of our trip have said the same.
It's wonderful that you've been able to do that, and that you've shared their story and their music. I'm gonna do the end of this, like public radio, where they go out with a song, right? So since you have one more selection that you'd like to play, so before you do that, first of all, let me just thank both of you for the wonderful presentation and the very rich musical traditions and your keen observations about the mixing of cultures and learning musical traditions back and forth. I was very struck, Amanda, by your comment regarding lack of books and the way orality therefore is so central, right? They need the song, and don't we all, for our variety of ways of engaging our spirit as we come together as communities. Thank you all for joining us. It's really been wonderful. As we listen to the last selection, I just want to say, I invite you to throw into the chat which of the recordings was your favorite. I will say that my favorite, I think like one of you said, was the hip hop Kol Dodi. That was just fantastic, but so were the others. So share what you loved, and please play the last piece while we have a chance to listen to it.
Yeah, and just a couple quick things. I saw more questions popping up in the chat. When we're done with this, I can put my email in the chat, and if people have questions that they didn't get to ask, you're free to reach out. This was when we spoke with Gershom, Rabbi Suzomu, about what he wanted to record. As I said, he was adamant. He said, I want a mixing of our styles. And so this is their Psalm 150 with the Ugandan rhythm underneath. And you'll see me in the center with the hat playing flute. I'm playing some jazz flute. To my left is Mike Stein, who added some bluegrass fiddle. And you'll see in the video, one of my colleagues, Mike Weiss, added a cantorial rendition.
Hallelujah.
Say goodbye. I'll let you let this keep on playing. Thank you so much, okay?
Hallelujah.